Right. Hello. Calva Daddy here. Good afternoon, first of all. Welcome to this beautiful May sunny day. This is part 3 of the murder of Bill J. Pumpernickel. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. This is Chapter 3, An Unlikely, Likely Suspect. So around Christmas time of 1887, it's now been about 2 months since the murder happened, and Rattlesnake County is reeling in its loss of its former mayor. The elections proved that the Democrats were able to sweep the vote after Pumpernickel had been murdered, and now Rattlesnake County was a democratically led city once again. At that same time, Jack Robinson and Tom Richards were still trying to find their suspects and bring them to justice. John Jacob Buchanan told them a month earlier that he knew a guy named Nathan, that he might be a good suspect. However, Buchanan had little to give on this man. They knew he was in his early 20s, had a weird European last name, and probably had an accomplice. However, that was all they could go off of. So around the same time, they decided to call back in Mr. Buchanan to see if they could give him a little more. They jogged Buchanan's memory, and Buchanan came up with this. Here's what he said. Let's see, Nathan. He was in his early 20s. He had black hair, shoulder length, like right above the shoulders, kind of curly. And he had a pencil-thin mustache. And, man, I think that's all I could remember at this moment. Well, Mr. Buchanan, this very much helps. We appreciate your time with us. Sure thing. Mr. Buchanan, you may leave. Peace out, Mr. Buchanan. From this point on, John Jacob Buchanan is not needed in this case. So the sketch that they came up with was pretty assuring. So a couple days after Christmas of 1887, they went to the city files. Now, that March, a census had been taken, and the police officers and investigators knew one thing. Nathan was obviously a citizen of Rattlesnake County on October 27th, 1887, and he worked at the mines. So this guy was a real person, and people saw him. So they looked through the city's census files. Let's see, Nathan. Aha! Tom Richards gestures over for Jack Robinson to take a look. Hey, Jack, think we found who we're looking for. Let's see, what do you got there, Tom? Let's see, Mr. Nathan Andreasen. He is from Latvian descent. Moved to the U.S. at the age of 7 and is 21 years old. Okay, 21. So how long has he been a citizen of Rattlesnake County? For about 15 months, I want to say. Okay, 15 months. Is there a photo of him? Why, yes, there is. Jack Robinson pulls out a photo of Nathan Andreasen, and Tom Richards compares it to the sketch of Mr. Nathan Andreasen, and the photos match up almost perfectly. They knew that they had their suspect, Nathan Andreasen. All they had to do now was locate where he was. However, that wasn't that easy. You see, Nathan had not been heard from since October 28th, and now, into the new year, it was getting hard to track him. I mean, this is 1887 we're talking about. Like, you can't geo-track somebody in 1887. So, police were kind of stumped. However, the whole town agreed to pitch in and try to find their suspect. They put up sketches of Mr. Andreessen in the town hall and town square, hoping that they would find a lead. However, no one came forward, and no one knew where Nathan Andreessen was. And the case went cold until April 13th, 1888. Now, here's what happened on that day. Well, to tell you what happened on that day, I need to take you a couple months back. So in an earlier episode, I noted that witnesses on Pumpernickel's final days said they saw a distinctive buggy patrolling the streets at around 5 p.m. Police estimated this was about an hour before Mr. Pumpernickel was killed. They were asked, what was the brand of this buggy? They said, Harrison. Now, Harrison was a very rare brand in Rattlesnake County. Only the elites used them and the very rich. Not a whole lot of commoners like you and me could get their hands on a Harrison buggy. So when people saw this, they knew that, okay, like this is someone of high richness. So on that cold April morning, police found a Harrison buggy parked in front of a house. Now this house, it wasn't unsuspecting. It was sort of in the outskirts of town. However, it was still surrounded by houses on either side. It wasn't the most impressive house. It was made of brick and a little bit of wood, and that was basically it. It was 3 stories. It looked big enough to be possessed by someone who was rich, so police decide to give it a go. They walk up the steps, and they knock on the front door. They hear nothing. However, a few seconds later, they hear what can be rustling, things dropping, things being frantically put away, and the sound of fast, heavy footsteps coming down. A few seconds of silence followed afterwards. The doorknob rustled, and the door opened. Standing at the door is what police described as an eccentric sort of man. According to police, he was about 5 feet 9 inches tall, 175 pounds, and his face had some rather distinctive features. He had a gap in his front teeth. He had short brown hair, however, it was thinning at the back and receding on the hairline. And he wore a red shirt with white stripes. The man standing at the door was a bit taken aback by the group of police officers standing at the door. Whoa, hey, officers, the man said. Can I help you with anything? Yes, sir, said one officer, shaking the man's hand. We're looking for suspects in the Pumpernickel case, and we were wondering if you could give us any tips. Sure, the man said. Follow me inside. Let me just get some stuff ready really quick. The man introduced himself as George Clinton. George Clinton was 31 years old and had been living in Rattlesnake County his entire life. His father was a Civil War veteran, and when he sadly passed away, they noticed that all his old war relics had been posted on the wall. There was an old Union flag, there was an old rifle, there was even an old Confederate flag. So, George Clinton sits the officers down at a table in the dining room and says, Can I get you something to drink? I got beer, liquor. Nah, we're good. We don't drink. Okay, perfect. Mr. Clinton, may you have a seat? Yeah, sure. What do you need to talk about? Well, Mr. Clinton, we just need to ask you a couple questions. Okay? Okay, I'm in. Mr. Clinton, how old are you? I'm 31 years old. I turned 31 in March. I was born in 1857. Okay? Mr. Clinton, what is your job affiliation? Well, full-time, I'm an architect. Okay? I also do photography, part-time, and I also work in a telegraph shop. Police kind of sort of knew this because as they were walking through Clint's house to get to the dining room, or the living room, sorry, they noticed stacks of photographs, protractors, rulers, and blueprints scattered all over the house. What was especially jarring is when one officer bent down to pick up a book that he had accidentally knocked over, he flipped through and found some pretty disturbing drawings and ramblings. what he described as just words and words and words and words going on. He decided not to invade Mr. Clint's personal privacy and decided to put the book down. When George Clint was asked about this, he revealed to the cops that he had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia at 17 years old, which would explain why Clint was looking kind of nervous during the interview, tapping his feet and fidgeting with his hands. After some small talk, Clint was brought to the idea of his Harrison buggy being seen on the night of Bill J. Pumpernickel's death. George Clint gave a rather peculiar answer. Well, you see, my grandmother is very sick, and we were thinking about moving her into a apartment building with a caretaker, so I was just helping her move some furniture. I was helping her move furniture, because she lives a couple miles away. Okay, Mr. Clint, what is your grandmother's name? Ava. Ava Dawson. And how old is your grandmother? She'll be 88 this September. Okay. Good to know, good to know. Well, Mr. Clint, thank you for your time with us, and we're going to get back to you if we have any more details. Thanks, officers. Thanks, officers. As the officers were leaving, they noticed something covered by a tarp in what looked like to be an office room. The police asked Clint to uncover this, and George Clint uncovered a actual Morse code telegraph machine. Yeah, my father gave this to me as his dying wish. He said, "I want you to have it," and yeah, I just kind of use it for communication, whatever I need. I mainly just look at it for like a relic or something. Cops said, "Okay." So, with that, they left George Clint's house. However, as they were leaving, an officer whispered into another man's ear, "Hey, keep your eyes peeled for this guy. Something about him didn't seem right." Okay, will do. So, and one last thing before he went, on George Clint's Harrison buggy, on every Harrison buggy, there was an identification number written on the back right tire. The identification number for George Clint's vehicle was 72316. Police were asked to write this down on a piece of paper, and they did, and now they had George Clint's identification number for his Harrison buggy. All right, so 2 days later, on April 15th, 1888, the investigators went to look when and where this buggy was purchased. They went to every single buggy shop in Rattlesnake County for 4 long hours. Police searched every single dealership in Rattlesnake County, which was about 12. Finally, at around 5 p.m. on April 15th, 1888, police found themselves at a place called Jimmy John's Rent-A-Buggy, where they rented and sometimes sold used buggies, usually of the higher class. So, the police walked in to Jimmy John's Rent-A-Buggy, and the owner, Jimmy Sullivan, said, "Whoa, police officers, what do you need?" "Well, we don't need anything. You see, we're investigating the Pumpernickel case." "Okay, I've heard about that. Can you tell me," the police said as they handed the identification card to Mr. Sullivan, "can you find out when this buggy was purchased?" "I certainly can. Let's see. This is a nice buggy, yeah. It was rented last summer for a 1-year lease. Do you have a name for this person who bought this buggy?" "I certainly do. Let me just see. Look through my records here. I'm sorry, looking through the files. There's a lot of people who rent the buggy. All right, here we go. You said 72316. Let's see. All right. Got it. Your buggy was rented out by a man named Paul Edgewood. Police kind of step back. Who the hell is Paul Edgewood? Well, the person who bought this buggy, said John Sullivan. It's as simple as that. I'm sorry, I really don't... I can't offer you that much help. I'm so sorry. Well, thank you for your time, Mr. Sullivan. Yeah. So, back at the police headquarters, police now were saying, okay, not one suspect, not two, but three. Now we have three subjects. It's a triangle here. What the hell is going on? Well, okay. You just need to calm down. Let's look. So we have three suspects. We all have their names. We know what two look like. And all we just need to find who the hell this Paul Edgewood guy is. So the following day, police looked through their census files and found that this Paul Edgewood guy had a notorious history in Rattlesnake County. So Paul Edgewood was born in August of 1865 in California, and he moved to Rattlesnake County at the age of 16 and was getting into trouble from the get-go. Paul could be described to locals as very, very violent, Confederate-leaning, and anti-law enforcement. Both Paul Edgewood's parents were Confederate Civil War veterans, and Paul Edgewood held very proudly to his descent, and that caused some very violent outbursts with people who didn't agree with him. Police discovered that in December of 1886, Paul Edgewood was arrested and served 6 weeks in jail after a drunken brawl fight that left a man unconscious and close to death. The man he almost beat unconscious was 40-year-old James Dawson. When police located James Dawson, who heard of the Pumpernickel case, he declined to give an interview and said he knew nothing about Paul, mainly due to the fact that he was literally punched unconscious by said Paul Edgewood. The report said that Mr. Edgewood was probably armed and dangerous, and he was constantly under surveillance for the couple months that he was released from prison. And also, just like Nathan Andreasen, Paul Edgewood was not seen after October 28th, 1887. So police now had a clue. Okay, so what if Nathan Andreasen and Paul Edgewood knew each other? Okay? So, Paul Edgewood's buggy was in the possession of George Clinton. So what if these guys formed a triangle? I don't know if I'm getting too far ahead of myself. We just need answers. We need answers. It could be a possibility. Listen, should we call back Mr. Buchanan? But we promised him that he wasn't needed in this case anymore. Let's just call him back because apparently this Nathan guy was spotted with a friend, and we just want to see if we could pinpoint it back to Paul Edgewood. So, a disgruntled John Jacob Buchanan was called back in for questioning for a third time, and he gave the description of Paul Edgewood. Very muscular, about 225 pounds, 6 feet 2 inches tall, brown hair, short on the top, kind of fluffier on the top, and very straight. And he was also clean-shaven and a white male. Police had a sketch made of Buchanan's description of Mr. Edgewood and compared it with Edgewood's mugshot taken in December of 1886, and the photos matched up perfectly. Police now confirmed that Nathan Andreasen and Paul Edgewood were connected. They were unsure about George Clinton. People assumed he just had their buggy, and he probably rented it not knowing that it was being used in a crime scene. So on crime investigation, sorry. So on April 17th, 1888, police visited George Clinton's house for a second time just to basically say, hey, we need your buggy and we're going to take it in. However, police got quite a surprise. The buggy was gone. So police knocked on Mr. Clinton's door. No answer. The house was vacant. So now, returning to the headquarters, police now had 3 for-sure suspects in the murder of Bill J. Pumpernickel. 21-year-old Nathan Andreessen, 22-year-old Paul Edgewood, and 31-year-old George Clinton. They knew what they looked like, and they had photos of all 3 suspects. However, one daunting question remained. Where were these men hiding? That does it for this episode. That was Chapter 3 of The Murder of Bill J. Pumpernickel, an unlikely, likely suspect. See you next weekend for Chapter 4. Calva Daddy, signing off.